Picture a palace, not the ruined kind, not the cleaned-up museum kind where you shuffle through rope-corded rooms in paper booties and stare at paintings of dead people in ruffs. A living palace, breathing, hot with bodies and candle smoke and the grease of roasting meat. Hung with tapestries so expensive a single panel could buy a village. Floors covered in fresh rushes every week, because the old rushes, by the time they're pulled up, are matted with bones and eggshells and dog hair, and the dark liquid evidence of everything that's been spilled on them since last Tuesday. Now fill it with 400 people. 400 people eating, sleeping, working, and doing everything else that bodies do, all inside the same walls day after day, in an age before plumbing, before sewers, before anybody understood that the thing making you sick and the thing you were standing in might be related. Add the smell of tallow candles burning at every hour. Add the smoke from fires that were never properly drawn. Add the midden heap just outside the kitchen door where the bones go, and the flies that follow. Add the particular sweetness of hay-stuffed mattresses 3 months past their last changing. Add the Thames, if you're near it, which on a warm day in August smells less like a river and more like a living decision made by 40,000 people simultaneously. That's a Tudor great house. That's where we're going tonight. Not as visitors peering through velvet ropes at the gilded ceiling. Not as tourists tilting our heads at the portraits and nodding at the little printed cards that explain the dates. We're going in through the back, through the low door beside the kitchen, stepping over the boy sleeping against the wall with his head on his arm, into the part of the house they never put in paintings. We're going in as a servant, 14 years old, 3 weeks off the cart from Suffolk, still blinking at the scale of it, still learning which corridors lead where, still making the mistake of walking too slowly past the steward and getting a clip across the back of the ear for it. We're going in as someone who, at this particular moment, needs very badly to use the toilet, and that in the year of our Lord 1547, in a grand English household in the service of a family so far above you socially that their laundry alone is worth more than everything your family has ever owned, is a problem that requires strategy. I make these history stories. I genuinely have no idea if you listen to them to fall asleep, or if you're the kind of person who lies awake specifically to learn about Tudor sewage management. Either way, welcome. Get comfortable. Here we go. Your eyes open in the dark, not the polite dark of a room with curtains, where light still seeps in around the edges and you can make out the shapes of furniture. Real dark. The dark of a room with no windows, or windows so small and so shuttered against the November cold that they might as well not exist. The dark where you genuinely cannot see your own hand in front of your face, and the only way you know where the wall is that you fell asleep against it, and your shoulder is still pressed to the cold plaster. For a moment you don't know where you are. That moment lasts longer than you'd like. Then the sounds come back to you. The breathing of the 3 other girls in the room, 2 of them asleep, one of them shifting and muttering under her thin blanket. The distant creak of the house settling, because old timber-framed houses do that, especially in cold weather. They contract and crack and groan like something alive, trying to find a more comfortable position. The very faint, very far-away sound of someone in the kitchen already at work, the scrape of an iron pot being dragged across stone. And then, sharper than any of that, immediate and undeniable, the reason you're awake. You need the privy. Not urgently, not yet, but urgently enough. The kind of need that won't let you go back to sleep, that's been there probably for 20 minutes already, working its way into your consciousness. That's been the reason your body has slowly pulled you up out of whatever dream you were having about your mother's kitchen and the smell of bread. You lie there for a moment, absolutely still, hoping it will go away. It does not go away. This is the thing nobody told you about service. Not your mother, who was in service herself for 12 years before she married and moved to the village and had you. Not the woman who recommended you to the steward. Not the steward himself during the 2 minutes of interview in which he looked you up and down like a horse. He was deciding whether to purchase, and then asked your name, and whether you had a clean character reference from the local priest. Nobody sat you down and explained the logistics of being a body in this house, of having physical needs in a place where your physical needs are at best an afterthought, and at worst, an inconvenience to be managed quickly and quietly and invisibly, with as little disruption to the household as possible, because that's the central rule of service. The rule underneath all the other rules about curtsying and keeping your eyes down, and speaking only when spoken to and moving quickly, and making no sound. The rule that nobody says out loud because it doesn't need to be said. Your body doesn't really belong to you anymore. It belongs to the work. It belongs to the household. It belongs to the schedule that starts before dawn and doesn't end until well after dark, with your needs slotted in around the edges wherever there's a gap, and if there isn't a gap, you wait. You push yourself upright, feeling the cold hit you immediately, the kind of cold that November in England has decided is its particular gift to the world. Your blanket falls away, and the air finds every part of you that was just warm. Your feet hit the floor, stone, bare, so cold it feels almost like pain. Your chemise is thin, your feet have no stockings, your shoes are somewhere in the dark and you spend a fumbling 10 seconds finding them by touch, one hand sweeping across the floor, making contact with the rough woolen edge of someone's skirt left in a heap. The girl nearest you stirs. Alice? A murmur, half asleep. Shh, you say. Go back to sleep. She does. They're all good at sleeping, the girls you share this room with, because they're all exhausted all the time. Sleep is the only thing that belongs entirely to you in this place, and they've learned to take it hard and deep whenever they can. You find your shoes. You put them on without lacing them. There isn't time, or rather there isn't light, and you'd lose your fingers trying to find the lacings in this dark. They flap slightly against your heels as you make your way to the door. The door opens into a corridor. The corridor is also dark, but slightly less so. There's a rushlight burning at the far end, guttering in some draught from somewhere, throwing just enough orange light to make out the shapes of doorways and the uneven flags of the floor. Here is your first decision of the morning, and it requires more calculation than you'd expect for someone who is still half asleep and cold and simply wants to relieve herself. Where are you going? This is not a simple question. Not in this house. Not for someone of your station. Here is what you know. There is a privy. Several, actually. The house has what the steward calls the House of Office, which is round the side of the building near the old brewery, a low wooden structure built against the outer wall, over a channel of water that runs down to the ditch. That's for servants, for the people like you, the ones who haul wood and carry water and empty fireplace grates at 5 in the morning. There is also the great garderobe at the end of the east wing, which is not for you, which is so far from not being for you that you were told specifically on your first day by a senior housemaid named Joan, who has been here for 7 years and who has the manner of someone who has survived several things and would prefer not to discuss them. You were told that you are not to use the east garderobe. Not now, not ever. Not unless someone has specifically instructed you to go there for a work purpose, in which case you knock first, wait to be told to enter, do whatever you've been asked to do and leave without dawdling. And there is the close stool. The close stool is in Lady Margaret's room, and if you so much as touch the handle on Lady Margaret's door at this hour, you will be dismissed before breakfast. So, the house of office it is. You make your way down the corridor, following the guttering rushlight, your shoes slapping softly against the stones. The house is full of sound even at this hour, the deep structural sounds of beams and timbers, the far-off kitchen noise, and under all of it a kind of dense inhabited silence. The silence of 400 people breathing in their sleep or near sleep. A silence that feels thick, almost physical, like walking through something. The rushlight on the wall is made of dried rush soaked in tallow. Animal fat, the cheap kind, not beeswax, nothing so fine as that for the servants' corridor. It smells like what it is, like something burned, like the inside of a butcher's shop on a warm day. You've gotten used to it over 3 weeks, which is to say you've stopped actively noticing it, but your nose still registers it, still puts it in the category of this place, this smell, these walls, part of the texture of where you are. Past the first corridor junction, past the door that leads to the pastry kitchen, where you can smell the banked fire and the faint sweetness of yesterday's baking, sugar and dried fruit and lard. Past the storage room where the candles are kept, where Joan told you a boy apprentice locked himself in for warmth 2 winters ago and wasn't found until morning, which she delivered as a cautionary tale about the dangers of taking unauthorized warmth without explaining precisely what the danger was. At the end of the passage, a door, and then steps down, 3 of them, and then the outside. November. God. The cold is different outside the house. Inside the house, you're cold. Outside the house, the cold is interested in you, the cold is purposeful. The wind that comes around the side of the building finds the gap between your chemise and your neck and your armpits and the backs of your knees with the thoroughness of a customs inspector. You have no cloak. Your cloak is upstairs in the room. You considered going back for it but decided against it because going back means navigating the dark corridor again, and also waking Margaret again, and also the urgency has, in the last few minutes, upgraded from suggestion to demand. The house of office is around the corner, 30 yards maybe, across a stretch of courtyard where the cobbles are slick with frost, where your shoes, uncleed, nearly slide out from under you on the 3rd step, and you catch yourself with a hand against the wall that comes away wet and cold and smelling of whatever grows on stone walls in November in England. The structure itself is unmistakable. In the dark, in the cold, you can smell it from 20 feet away. You've had 3 weeks to get used to this smell. You're not there yet. Let me tell you about the house of office, because you need to understand what you're walking toward with cold, bare hands and slapping shoes in the dark at, you don't even know what time it is. 5 o'clock, maybe. 4. The kitchen fire was going but barely, so possibly even earlier. The house of office is a wooden building. 3-sided, open at the front, built against the outer wall of the house with a gap in the outer wall that, in theory, allows waste to drop down into the channel below. The channel is supposed to be flushed by the stream that runs along the outer property wall, diverted for exactly this purpose by someone who thought about the problem 100 years ago when the house was first built and was, in their way, an optimist. The stream doesn't always flush the channel. In winter, it slows. In very cold weather, it freezes. It has been very cold for a week. Above the channel there is a bench, A wooden bench with holes cut into it. 3 holes, because the household has always had at least 40 servants, and 3 holes was presumably the calculation someone made about throughput. The bench is worn smooth with use, which tells you something about how many years and how many people have sat exactly where you're about to sit. The wood is dark with age and other things. The smell is the smell of everything that has ever passed through 3 holes in a bench since approximately 1480-something, contained and concentrated by cold stone walls and the particular alchemy of winter. There is no door. There never was a door on this side. The side facing the courtyard is open, which means anyone crossing the courtyard can see anyone in the House of Office, which means this is a transaction you perform with a certain speed and without meeting anyone's eyes. There is no light inside. You step in by feel and familiarity, left hand trailing the wall, right hand finding the bench, sitting down on wood that is so cold it's a physical shock even through the thin fabric of your chemise, cold that makes you inhale sharply and then breathe out in a cloud that you can feel if not see. You think about your mother's house. Your mother's house had a privy too, but a smaller, simpler one at the bottom of the garden, a little stone building your father built 30 years ago before you were born, that smelled of the earth rather than this, that in summer had meadow, sweet growing beside the path to it, and in winter had the smell of cold grass and the sound of wind in the bare hedgerow. It was yours, just yours, your family's. The privacy was absolute. The door latched from the inside, the world shut out. Here there is no latch. There is barely a door. The whole point of the thing is throughput, not privacy. You do what you came to do. The cold makes it quick. The dark makes it anonymous, or nearly. There's no one crossing the courtyard at this hour, or if there is, they're moving fast and not interested in looking. The sounds from inside the house are muffled by the wall. For 30 seconds you're alone in a way you're almost never alone in this house, and you notice this the way you'd notice sunlight coming through a gap in clouds, briefly and with something like gratitude. Then you stand, and here is where it gets specific. Here is where the Tudor part becomes real. There is no paper. There's not going to be paper for another 100 years, roughly. Not the cheap, mass-produced kind. Paper exists, obviously. You've seen it. There are papers in the steward's office. There's a ledger on his desk he keeps under lock and key, and so paper's expensive. Writing paper is not something you wipe yourself with. What there is in a wooden box beside the bench is a bundle of hay. Old hay. The kind that's been sitting there long enough to go slightly soft. And beside the hay, when the hay runs out, moss. A small basket of dried moss that someone fills periodically from God knows where, from whatever mossy place they've identified on the property. You use the hay. You try not to think about it too hard. You've been trying not to think about it too hard for 3 weeks, and you are getting better at this, which is either a sign of resilience or a sign of what happens to a person when their options are limited, and you can decide which of those things it is later, when you're warm. The walk back is colder than the walk out, because now you're less single-minded, because the urgency is gone and in its place is just the cold and the dark and the 50 yards between you and your blanket. The courtyard cobbles are still treacherous. The wind is still finding all the gaps. Somewhere above you, in the lightning dark, it's maybe closer to 5 now. The sky has a faint grey quality at the edges that wasn't there before. A crow is making the particular sound crows make when they've found something interesting. Back through the door, up the 3 steps, along the passage with the tallow rushlight, now burned lower, throwing less light. Past the pastry kitchen smell, past the candle store, back to your corridor and your door and the room with the 3 breathing shapes and the cold stone floor. You get back into bed, pulling the blanket up hard, trying to reassemble the warmth you lost, which takes a long time because the blanket was never that warm to begin with. You lie there. You think about the house of office. You think about the fact that you will be back there in approximately 3 hours to clean it. This is your morning job, one of your morning jobs. You have a list of morning jobs that was given to you on your first day by Joan, who delivered it in a tone that suggested she'd given this list to many girls before you, and several of them had cried, and some of them had left. The list includes sweeping the ashes from Lady Margaret's fireplace and carrying them to the ash pile, refilling the firewood basket in Lady Margaret's antechamber, carrying up the ewer of fresh water and the basin for Lady Margaret's morning wash, helping Nan, that's the other senior maid, with the laying of the table for the household's morning meal, and cleaning the house of office, which means raking out the channel beneath the bench if it's become blocked, replacing the hay and the moss, carrying a bucket of water to rinse the bench and the walls, removing whatever evidence of the night has accumulated on and around and under the bench, because when it's cold and dark and there's no door, aim is approximate. This is the part of the work that is simply the work, with no softening. This is what nobody says out loud in nice company when they talk about domestic service. When your aunt says that service is a good position, that service teaches you your place in the world, that service builds character. She's not thinking of the house of office at 5 in the morning in November. But here you are, you close your eyes, you think, I will sleep another hour. I will sleep until the kitchen girls start moving properly, until there's light enough to work by, until the world has decided it's willing to be morning again. Your body agrees. Your body is very tired. 3 weeks of this work has tired you in a way you didn't know you could be tired. Not just the end of day tired you know from home, from farm work and garden work and carrying water and helping your mother with the wash, but a continuous pervasive tiredness that lives in your legs and your lower back and the particular place between your shoulder blades where you carry water yolks. Sleep comes. The church bell somewhere beyond the house wall rings 5. You don't hear it. Your name is Alice Marsh. You're 14 years old. You came from Beccles in Suffolk, which is a market town small enough that everybody knows everybody, and large enough that everybody knows everybody's business, which meant that the week after your father died, late last winter, fever, quick, the kind of quick that's almost cruel in its mercy. The whole town knew you needed a position. The priest wrote the letter. Your mother's cousin knew the steward's cousin. 2 weeks later, you were on a cart heading south, your mother standing at the road watching you go, her face doing the thing that faces do when they're trying very hard not to show the thing they're feeling. You've never been to London before. You've never been further from Beccles than the market at Bungay, 12 miles south. The cart ride was 4 days. 4 days of road in November, jolting over ruts, sharing a cart with a barrel of salted herrings and a man who snored with his mouth open and smelled of his profession, which appeared to involve something with sheep. The house is not in London, as it turns out. It's outside London, in one of the great houses that have grown up along the river west of the city, where the families with money and connections to the court keep their principal households when they're not actually at court. Close enough to ride in a few hours if you're called. Far enough to feel like the country. Sir William Lacy's house, that's where you are. Sir William Lacy, who has 4 daughters and 2 sons and a wife named Lady Margaret, who is thin and pale and has eyes that notice everything and a tongue that can strip paint. and who has been ill for the last 3 months, which is why you were hired to add to the household, because her personal servants have been running themselves ragged between their regular duties and the extra requirements of a sick mistress, and someone in the upper household finally made the calculation that another body was cheaper than the burnout of the existing ones. You're not Lady Margaret's personal maid. You're too young, too new, too unknown. You're the additional body. The one who does the things that other people have run out of time to do. The fireplace ash, the water carrying, the house of office. You're learning the hierarchy from the ground up. In this house. And this is true in most great houses of the time, in most of England, in most of Europe, anywhere with enough people in one building to develop formalized systems of human organization. The hierarchy is not a metaphor. It's not a corporate org chart that people nod at and then more or less ignore in practice. It's a physical, daily, material reality. It determines where you sleep, what you eat, where you sit, where you walk, and yes, where, how, and under what circumstances you attend to the needs of your body. Lady Margaret uses a close-stool. You have never seen a close-stool up close, but you have seen it from across the room when you were setting the fire, and it is an object so different from the bench with 3 holes in the courtyard building that they almost seem like they should have different names. The close-stool is a piece of furniture, a box, wooden, covered in velvet, dark red velvet, the nap worn smooth in places from years of use but still unmistakably velvet, with a padded lid that opens to reveal a pewter bowl inside, removable, sitting in a fitted cavity lined with more fabric. The seat is padded. The padding is soft, some kind of fine wool batting under more fabric. There is a lid, an actual lid, private, enclosed, yours. Beside it, on a small table, are kept the materials for after. These are not hay. They are not moss. They are cloths, small, soft, cut from old linen, washed and folded, and in a small pot something that smells faintly of roses, a perfume preparation of some kind that Lady Margaret's personal maid, Agnes, a woman of 25 who's been in the household since she was your age, and who has the manner of someone who considers herself 5 or 6 social steps above the rest of you, applies to the folded cloths before setting them out each morning, perfume cloths, folded, for a toilet. This is what class looks like in the body. The bowl of the close-stool is emptied each morning by Agnes, who carries it down the back stairs, specifically the back stairs, never the main stair. This is another rule that exists because some things are supposed to be invisible, to a particular point of disposal that you haven't yet identified precisely, but which you know involves the same ultimate destination as the house of office, just via a more dignified route. And Agnes's job in this respect is considered superior to yours. Agnes is a personal attendant to Lady Margaret. She has daily access to her mistress's private rooms. She dresses her, undresses her, brushes her hair, assists with her wash, and yes, empties her close-stool bowl. This is intimacy, not degradation. This is proximity to power. The difference between Agnes emptying a pewter bowl lined with soft linen and you raking out a channel under a bench is not, in Tudor terms, the difference between good work and bad work. It is the difference between being trusted and being useful. You lie in your bed thinking about this. The world outside is getting lighter, not much lighter. Enough. In this house the days are organised around Sir William's schedule and Lady Margaret's health. Sir William is largely in London at the moment, present in the house perhaps 3 days a week, the rest of his time spent at the Inns of Court or at whatever discussions attend a man of his station who has avoided, so far, the turbulence that has swallowed other families, families with better connections and worse judgment, or better judgment and worse luck, or simply the wrong friend at the wrong moment when the mood at court turned. This is the year after Henry VIII died, January 28, 1547, Dean. Henry is 6 months dead. The new king is Edward VI, who is 9 years old, who is surrounded by men who are having a vigorous conversation about who actually runs England for the next decade. And that conversation has the quality of several dogs approaching one bone from different directions. Sir William has positioned himself apparently in the correct relation to this conversation, close enough to be relevant, far enough to be safe, which is a genuinely difficult balance to maintain, and which explains why he spends so much time in London, and why Lady Margaret, when she's well enough to attend to business, spends so much time at her writing desk. You know only the edges of this. You know it the way servants always know the politics of a household, through fragments. A tone of voice, a door closed harder than usual, the steward's face when a rider arrives with letters, the way Agnes whispered something to Nan last week and Nan's mouth went thin and flat and didn't open again for the rest of the afternoon. What you know, specifically, is this. Lady Margaret is ill, Sir William is worried, and when powerful people are worried, the pressure comes down through the household the way pressure always travels in these structures, from the top where the anxiety lives to the bottom where the consequences are felt. And you are as close to the bottom as it's possible to be while still being inside the house. It's time to get up. Joan is already awake. You can hear her, the particular sound of Joan getting dressed, which is efficient and soundless in the way that everything Joan does is efficient and soundless, as if she's made a private agreement with the house never to cause inconvenience. Her shoes are always laced. Her cap is always on straight. She's been here 7 years. She's learned to be invisible while remaining effective, which is, you're beginning to understand the whole art of service. Alice, not loud, not a request. You're already sitting up. The cold again. It doesn't get better. You've been hoping since you arrived that you'd simply stop noticing it, but the cold of this house is persistent enough that it manages to be surprising every single time. The floorboards in this room creak. Not all of them, not the same ones every time. The house has moods. In the mornings it creaks more than at night, as if the warmth of 40 sleeping bodies has been just enough to shift the structure slightly, and now the cold is pushing it back. You dress in the dark. You have done this enough times now that it's a sequence, not a search. The chemise is already on, the petticoat is next, folded at the foot of the bed, your fingers finding the waistband, stepping into it, tying it quickly with the practiced efficiency of someone who has learned that cold is the great accelerant. Your grey wool kirtle over the top, the ties at the back, which you do yourself because Joan is already done dressing and has other things to do, and because independence in the small physical tasks is the only independence available at this level of the hierarchy. The cap. Your cap is white, plain linen that ties under the chin. Putting it on in the dark by feel is something you've nearly mastered. You still sometimes get the tie uneven and have to redo it, but this morning you feel it sit right the first time. Your hair is braided and pinned up underneath it, the way Joan showed you in your first week. Hair uncovered means something specific in this world. It means unmarried, young, potentially disreputable. Your hair covered means you understand the rules. You're playing by them. You're safe. Shoes. Laced this time because there's enough grey light coming under the door now to make out the shape of them, and you do it quickly. the rough leather of the laces moving through the hooks with the speed of repetition. Joan is at the door. She doesn't look back to check if you're ready. She expects you to be ready. This is a thing you've learned about Joan. She doesn't verify. She assumes. And if you're not there when she expects you to be there, you find out what Joan looks like when she's wrong about an assumption, which is an expression you've seen once and would prefer not to see again. You're there, into the corridor. Now there are two of you, moving together through the grey light, and the household is waking up around you. Not all at once, not dramatically, but incrementally. Sounds emerging from behind closed doors, someone coughing, the kitchen noise increasing in volume and complexity, the smell of smoke thickening as more fires catch. The first job of the morning is the ash. Lady Margaret's room. You've been in Lady Margaret's room every morning for 3 weeks, but it still requires a moment of adjustment each time. It's not that the room is larger than anything you've seen before, although it is. It's not that the ceiling is high, hung with painted cloth that rustles in draught you can't feel from the floor. It's the smell of it. And here the smell is not one thing, but several things layered together in a specific way that tells you something about the gap between her life and yours. There is the smell of the fireplace, wood ash, the ghost of last night's fire, the particular cold fire smell that is different from any other smell and that you will never be able to smell again in your life, 40 years from now, without being back in this room. There is the smell of herbs strewn on the floor, mixed into the rushes, lavender, rue, something you can't identify that has a bitter greenness to it. There is the smell of the wax candles in their holders on the mantelpiece, beeswax, which is nothing like tallow, which is almost pleasant, a kind of sweetness. There is the faint, sweet and sour smell of illness, which has been there since you arrived, but which has strengthened this week. Agnes whispers to Nan, which is why the physician is coming Thursday. And there is, close to the corner where the close-stool sits, draped in its velvet cover, the faint but unmistakable smell of what the close-stool is for. Perfumed, managed, made as acceptable as it can be made, still there. This is the fundamental truth about the Tudor period that no amount of velvet and beeswax and perfumed rose preparations entirely conceals. Everybody has a body, everybody's body does the same things, and the smell is the smell, regardless of how much textile you hang around it. The nobility of England in 1547 produces the same waste as the poorest labourer in the coldest cottage in Suffolk. The difference is purely in the management of that fact, the architecture built around it, the hierarchy of who deals with it, and how, and with what tools. Lady Margaret herself is asleep when you come in. This is usual. You've learned to move like a shadow in this room. The fireplace is in the corner furthest from the bed, and you go directly there without looking at the bed, without making any sound above the unavoidable sounds of ashen metal, working as fast as you can without creating the sharp sounds that wake people. The fireplace is cold. The grate is full of white and grey ash, last night's fire completely spent. You set down the ash bucket and the small brush, iron-handled, stiff-bristled, and begin. Ash is deceptive. It looks clean, soft, almost powdery in the early morning light. It's neither. It gets into everything. Your fingers turn grey in seconds. Your sleeve, if you're not careful, sweeps the edge of the grate and picks up a stripe of grey that will be there all day. The ash rises in small clouds with each stroke of the brush, and the clouds drift and land on the hearthstone and on the floor and on you, and the smell of it is in your throat within 30 seconds. That particular cold charcoal smell, dry and slightly bitter. You work systematically. Brush the larger pieces into the bucket first, then the finer ash, which resists the brush and requires more care. The iron bars of the grate need wiping too. There's a rag in the bucket for this, already grey from yesterday's use. The whole job takes maybe 8 minutes if you're efficient. You're efficient. Lady Margaret stirs once. A sound from the bed, a shift, a small cough that makes your shoulders tighten. The cough of someone who's been coughing regularly and who has learned to make it small, contained. Something to be managed rather than surrendered to. It subsides. You hear her breathing settle again. Out of the room. Pull the door closed. Carry the ash bucket down the back stairs to the ash pile in the yard, where it joins the evidence of every other fireplace that has been cleaned this morning. The ash pile is itself a resource. It'll be collected eventually, used in laundry, in lye making, in soap. But right now it's just grey and large and cold, steaming slightly where yesterday's warmer ash meets the cold morning air. Then the wood box, back to the storage area, which is half full of logs cut last week, stacked in the efficient interlocking pattern that the woodman requires, running 2 fingers along the cut ends to find the driest ones, because Lady Margaret's fire doesn't get the green wood. Lady Margaret's fire gets the wood that's been drying for 6 months in the covered stack, not the stuff from last Tuesday's cutting that'll spit and smoke and sulk in the grate. You load the wood box on your back, using the carrying cloth because the edges of the logs are rough and will catch the wool of your kirtle without it and carry it back up the stairs. Then the water. The water for Lady Margaret's morning wash is carried from the kitchen, where it's been heated overnight in the large iron cauldron that sits at the back of the kitchen fire and never goes cold. Not properly, even in the worst of the weather. The kitchen is warm, genuinely dramatically warm compared to the back corridors and the outdoor yard, with 4 fires going, and the ovens built into the walls and the sheer body heat of the kitchen staff who start work at 3 in the morning and don't stop until 10 at night. Mary the kitchen girl hands you the jug without looking up. She's stirring something that smells of onions and bone. The water in the jug is hot. You can feel it through the ceramic, a welcome warmth against your palms. And you carry it carefully up the back stairs again, jug in both hands, elbows slightly bent to absorb the jolts of the stairs, keeping the water level steady. The ewer in Lady Margaret's room is silver, which you lift with the same careful efficiency. Pour the hot water in, set it on the washstand beside the basin. The basin is silver too. The soap is a small dry cake kept in a wooden box, hard and grey-white, scented with something floral that might be lavender or might be rose or might be both. Lady Margaret's soap is not the soap you use. Lady Margaret's soap costs more than your monthly wage. You leave before she wakes. Agnes will attend to everything from here. The washing, the dressing, the close-stool. Your part of Lady Margaret's morning is done. Down to the main hall for the laying of the breakfast table, which is where Nan is already working, moving with the controlled speed of someone who's been doing this for 5 years and could do it in her sleep, setting trenchers and setting cups and adjusting the salt cellar to its precise position at the centre of the upper table, because the salt cellar's position is not arbitrary, because where the salt cellar sits tells everyone at the table where the line is between the people who matter and the people who matter less. And in this household, as in all households, this geography is taken seriously. You take the lower end of the table. This is also not arbitrary. The breakfast is bread and ale for the servants. Pale ale, not strong, brewed in the house's own brewhouse, slightly sour, the kind of sourness that means it's working rather than the kind that means it's gone wrong. The bread is yesterday's, which in a fine household this size means it's still good. It was white bread, the expensive kind made from bolted flour, not the coarse dark bread you'd eat at home. And day-old fine bread is still finer than what you ate most mornings in Beccles. You eat standing. You've not sat down for a meal since you arrived here. There are benches at the servants' table, but the mornings are too busy for sitting. You eat quickly, you take what you need, you're back at work. Sitting is for the meal at noon, when there's a pause built into the day, when the upper servants, the steward, the senior gentleman, the cook, sit at table with some formality, and the rest of you find places and eat your portion, and try to be invisible if anything is happening at the upper end that you'd rather not be noticing. The bread this morning is fine. It is genuinely fine. You eat it in 4 bites and drink the ale, and feel your body accept both with something like relief. You haven't been hungry since you arrived. Not properly hungry. The house feeds its servants adequately, because servants who eat poorly work poorly, and because starving the lower household is, in Sir William Steward's calculation, less efficient than the cost of keeping them fed. This is not kindness, it's arithmetic. But you notice the food in a way you didn't notice it at home, the way you notice things when they've been uncertain for a while. The bread is good, the ale is drinkable, you're warm enough, or close to warm enough. These things register as facts, small facts, each one a small proof that you're surviving. This is what you think about on the walk to the House of Office, carrying your bucket and your rake and the basket of fresh hay. The morning is properly light now, pale November light, the sun not yet high enough to do much, but the grey translucent light of a clear cold day that turns the frost on the cobbles into something that's almost beautiful if you're not currently stepping on it. The House of Office, in the daylight, is what it is. You've made a practice of not looking at it directly as you approach, of keeping your eyes at a middle distance that registers the structure without engaging with the details. This is a skill available to you because you've been doing this for 3 weeks, and the shock of the first time has faded into the dull, ongoing fact of every morning since. You hold your breath for the first minute. Your body insists on this, regardless of your intentions. After the first minute, your body capitulates and begins breathing again, and by the end of the second minute you've adjusted to the particular quality of the air inside the structure, and your nose has stopped sending urgent messages and settled into a low-grade, continuous complaint that you've learned to set aside. The rake, first, along the channel. This is the worst part. You know exactly what the rake is dragging, what it's moving, what it's breaking up, what you're going to have to carry in the bucket to the disposal point behind the East Kitchen garden. You know it with your whole body, the weight on the rake handle, the smell that intensifies with each pass, the particular sound of the rake's iron tines against stone. You think during this task about a variety of other things. You've discovered that thinking about other things is the most effective strategy for this work. This morning you think about the mare you saw being led through the courtyard yesterday by one of the grooms. A bay, young, high-stepping, nervous about something, and the groom speaking to her in the low, continuous voice of someone who knows horses, and who has learned that calm is contagious if you have enough of it. You think about the smell of the mare, clean animal smell, hide and hay, which is, you're aware, an interesting thing to think about given where you currently are, but which is effective. The channel is cleared, the bucket is heavy, you carry it to its place, then back, the bench, the rag and water, the hay replaced, the moss basket refilled from the store kept in a box against the outer wall. Done. This is 25 minutes of your morning. You've been up for nearly 2 hours. It's probably 7 o'clock, maybe 7:30. The day is starting in earnest. In the great hall of the house, the upper household is gathering. Sir William is in London today. He left yesterday afternoon, his small retinue clattering out of the courtyard with the energy of people who are going somewhere important. So the morning's activity has a slightly different quality. The tension that's always present when Sir William is in residence easing fractionally. The household loosening by a degree or two, the way a hand might loosen on a rope when the person holding the other end goes around a corner. This is not a holiday. Lady Margaret is ill, and Lady Margaret's standards do not relax simply because her husband is elsewhere. Lady Margaret was, before her marriage, a daughter of a family considerably grander than the Lacys, and she carries this fact the way she carries herself, without mentioning it, but with a posture that makes it clear. The household knows it. The household has, in the aggregate, absorbed it so deeply that the standards are maintained as a matter of internal logic, not as a matter of direct supervision, but there is a quality to the morning that's different, a few degrees warmer. You notice this in the way conversations in the kitchen run longer than usual, in the way Joan stops in the corridor and actually looks at you when she has something to say rather than directing her words at the general middle distance. Lady Margaret's up, Joan says. Agnes says she slept better. This is good news. When Lady Margaret sleeps badly, the morning arrangements shift and compound, and your list of tasks becomes conditional in a way that makes everything harder to navigate. The physician still coming Thursday? Still Thursday? Joan moves on. That's the conversation. But it's more conversation than you get on a bad day. You've been thinking, since the House of Office this morning, about the close-stool, not in a morbid way, in a practical way, in the way you found yourself thinking about a lot of things in this house, as problems of architecture and allocation, of who gets what and why and what the what says about the who. The close-stool belongs to Lady Margaret. There are 2 other close-stools in the house, as far as you've been able to determine. One in Sir William's chamber, which is a larger, grander version with gilded fittings and a velvet seat in blue rather than red, and one in the room used by Sir William's mother when she visits, which is slightly plainer but still far above the House of Office in the hierarchy of sanitary provision. The garderobe, the architectural feature, the actual built-into-the-wall privy, is at the end of the east wing, carved out of the thickness of the wall, with a stone seat and a shaft that drops into the moat. This is medieval technology, essentially. Tudor houses inherited it from the houses that came before. The garderobe smells less than the House of Office because the shaft is longer and the drop is greater, and the airflow from the moat creates a kind of passive ventilation that keeps the worst of it moving. But the garderobe is cold with the particular cold of a stone shaft, and the seat is stone, and using it in November is an exercise in commitment. The garderobe is technically available to senior male servants. The steward has been known to use it apparently, and the gentleman who acts as Sir William's secretary, a precise young man from Oxford named Humphrey, who writes everything down and eats as if each bite has been scheduled in advance. Senior female servants use chamber pots. This is another level of the system you're still mapping. Joan has a chamber pot in the room she shares with Agnes. A slightly nicer room than yours, with a proper window and 2 beds rather than 1. The chamber pot is emptied each morning in a particular way that involves a particular back passage and a particular small window above the kitchen garden. You know this because you've seen Joan carrying it, Seen the particular angle of her arm that indicates something is full without announcing what? Nobody says, "I'm going to empty my chamber pot." The vocabulary is careful, neutral, avoidant. Attend to things. Take a moment. See to the room. The thing itself is not named. The implements are never discussed in company. The tasks surrounding it are assigned without explanation, with the assumption that everyone understands the assignment even if the assignment is never stated. You are 14 years old. You have figured this out. What you have not yet done is worked out what the middle servants do, the ones above the chamber pot level but below the close-stool level, the ones in the narrow middle band of household hierarchy, the upper cook's assistant, the ladies' tiring women, plural. Lady Margaret has two beyond Agnes, who come in the morning and leave in the evening, the chaplain, the physician when he visits. You are assembling this information through observation because asking directly would be, "You understand this without having been told," wrong. Not forbidden, exactly, but wrong. Asking about these arrangements is treating the invisible as visible, naming the unnamed, and the unnamed is unnamed because the act of naming it makes everyone in earshot uncomfortable in a way that is disproportionate to the practical question. So you watch, and you learn. The chaplain, Father Edmund, a small narrow man with ink-stained fingers and the mild, distracted air of someone who is always in the middle of a thought, uses, you've determined, the garderobe in the east wing despite the cold, because the alternative is using the house of office, which would place him in the company of the kitchen boys and the stable hands, and Father Edmund has a sense of his own dignity that this proximity would compromise. He makes this trip every morning at approximately the same time, and you've noticed that the trip takes considerably longer than the architecture requires, which suggests that the garderobe is serving for Father Edmund a secondary function. A few minutes of solitude in a house that provides very little of it. The physician, when he comes, uses Sir William's own close stool, which Agnes has been specifically told to leave available for him. This is an honour. The physician is a man of learning and significance, and the provision of Sir William's close stool for his use signals that significance acknowledges it in the physical, material language that Tudor households speak. The upper cook, a large red-faced woman named Marjorie, who's been running Sir William's kitchen for 20 years, and who has the authority of a general and the temper of a weather system, has, as far as anyone can tell, entirely transcended the question. In 20 years of watching, none of the current kitchen staff have ever seen Marjorie leave the kitchen during the day for purposes not related to cooking. It's possible she doesn't. It's possible she has, through sheer discipline and force of character, renegotiated her relationship with her body's requirements in a way that allows for uninterrupted food service. This is probably not literally true, but the myth has a life in the kitchen that nobody disturbs. And then you and the 3 other girls in your room, and the kitchen maids and the laundry women and the scullery boys and the stable lads and the woodcutters, who aren't technically household staff, but who come in and out regularly enough to be a constant presence. All of you use the house of office, without privilege, without ceremony, without perfumed rose preparations. That's the system. The morning passes in the way that mornings pass, relentlessly, in small tasks, each one complete before the next begins. The list working down through the day's requirements, the way a candle burns through itself, leaving nothing except the next thing. Today there is a problem. The problem is Lady Margaret. Specifically, Lady Margaret has asked for a bath. This happens periodically, maybe once a month, sometimes more often when she's well, sometimes less often when she's not. The bath, when it happens, is a production of the first order. It requires the cooperation of virtually the entire female side of the household, a considerable investment of time and water and fuel, and a particular kind of organised chaos that begins at least 2 hours before the bath itself and continues for at least an hour after. Agnes has told Joan. Joan has told you. The bath is today. Here is what a bath means in this house. First, the tub must be brought up. The tub is wooden, a large barrel-like object bound with iron, too heavy for one person, that lives in the storage room below stairs and must be carried up to Lady Margaret's chamber by 2 people, carried sideways through the door and positioned in front of the fire that you have already laid and lit this morning with the good dry wood. The tub is lined, once it's in place, with linen cloth to protect Lady Margaret's skin from the rough wood. This is Agnes's job, the lining. Then the water. The water for the bath must be heated in the kitchen in the large cauldron, and brought up in ewers, multiple ewers, because the tub requires a volume of water that no single ewer can supply. This is where you come in. This is where the morning's extra body that is you becomes specifically necessary. You will carry water up and down from the kitchen to Lady Margaret's chamber, while Marjorie heats water in rotations and Joan organises the ewers and times the trips so that nothing cools too much in transit, and the net temperature of the bath when Lady Margaret gets into it is warm rather than tepid. This requires, essentially, a relay. You and the other junior girl, her name is Beth, she's 13. She arrived from Surrey a month before you did and has the slightly glazed look of someone who has recently decided to simply not think too hard about anything until further notice, running trips up and down the back stairs while the kitchen roars and steams. This is how bathing works for a wealthy woman in 1547. Think about that for a moment. She's wealthy. Her husband has a title. She lives in a house with 30 rooms and 400 workers and more fabric on her walls than most people will touch in a lifetime. And getting clean requires 2 servants running up and down stairs for an hour with ewers of hot water, while the entire female household reorganises its morning around the project. Now think about you. When did you last have a bath? The honest answer is, you're not sure. Not since you arrived. You wash your face and hands every morning with the cold water from the basin in your room, and you wash more thoroughly once a week when Joan unlocks the small washing room behind the laundry, and you have access to a basin and a jug and a bar of the coarse yellow soap that lives there. This is more than many people at your level of the household get. Some of the kitchen boys don't wash at all, or not beyond the minimal face wash that custom and occasionally direct instruction requires. Personal cleanliness in Tudor England is not a universal standard. It is, like everything else, distributed according to station, means, and proximity to the resources that make it possible. The most recently washed people in this household are Lady Margaret, Sir William, and their 2 oldest daughters, who each have their own arrangements for regular washing that are almost but not quite as elaborate as their mother's bath. Below them, Agnes and the senior ladies' maids wash with reasonable regularity. Below them, Joan and the senior domestic servants have the washing room access on a schedule. Below them, you. Below you. And this is the part that is hardest to absorb, coming from a Suffolk household that was poor but clean. Below you are people who may not have had a proper wash in weeks. The laundry women, the stable hands. The boys who turn the spit in the kitchen, who work 12 hours a day bent over a fire that is constantly at them. These people are not dirty because they don't care or don't know better. They're dirty because the means of being clean require time and resources, hot water, fuel, privacy, the right tools, and those resources are allocated up the hierarchy. The people at the top are clean because cleaning takes resources and they have resources. The people at the bottom are not because they don't. The smell of the house, which you've registered every morning since you arrived as a kind of layered richness, wood smoke and cooking and herbs and candle wax and the particular damp wool smell of many bodies, is in part the smell of this allocation. The upper household smells of rosewater and lavender. The lower household smells of work. You don't think of this as unjust exactly. You're not yet sophisticated enough, or perhaps you're too sophisticated in a different way. You've absorbed the logic of the hierarchy completely enough that its outcomes feel natural rather than constructed. This is what the hierarchy does. This is what any sufficiently total system does to the people who live inside it long enough. It begins to feel like gravity. But you notice the difference between your hands and Lady Margaret's hands. Your hands, after 3 weeks of ashen water and wood and cold, are red and slightly cracked at the knuckles, the skin thickened at the finger pads, one nail broken down to the quick where you caught it on the wood store door. Lady Margaret's hands, which you've seen up close when setting the fire, are pale and smooth, the skin soft, the nails neat and even. Her hands are the hands of someone who does not carry things. Yours are the hands of someone who does nothing else. The water runs, the trips go up and down. By the time the tub is filled enough, your arms ache from the ewers, and the kitchen is damp with steam, and Marjorie has moved from low-grade irritation into the elevated state she reserves for when the kitchen has been significantly disrupted for non-cooking purposes. Last one, Joan says. You take the last ewer and make the last trip. At the door of Lady Margaret's chamber you stop and wait. Agnes opens the door from inside, takes the ewer from you, closes the door. Behind the door you hear the sound of water and a low voice, Lady Margaret's, saying something to Agnes, something too quiet to make out. That's as close as you'll get to the bath. You go back to the kitchen and pour cold water from the bucket over your hands and dry them on the kitchen rag and think about absolutely nothing for 30 seconds, which is the closest thing to rest that the morning offers. Marjorie watches you from the fire. She's stirring something again. She's always stirring something. Her relationship with the kitchen is that of a person, and a very demanding, very beloved thing. Like a gardener with an elaborate garden, or a musician with an instrument that's slightly temperamental and requires constant attention. Sit, she says. You sit on the low stool beside the fire. The warmth hits you all at once, front of the body first, and it's so comprehensive after the cold of the back stairs that you close your eyes for 2 seconds and feel your whole frame exhale. Marjorie hands you something without comment, a piece of bread torn from a loaf with something on it. Dripping, salted, still faintly warm, you eat it. You don't say anything. Marjorie doesn't say anything. You sit by the fire for 3 minutes with the bread and the warmth and the sound of the kitchen around you. The other women working, the distant sound of the scullery, the creak of the spit turning over the secondary fire. Then Joan appears in the kitchen door. Alice! You stand. You go. This is life. The midday meal is the centre of the day. The household comes together in the great hall for the noon meal in a way that it doesn't for the other meals. Breakfast is scattered, supper is smaller, and the noon meal has a quality of dailiness, a demonstration of the household's organisation that everyone contributes to and everyone attends. Upper servants at the upper table, lower servants at the lower tables. The upper table has better food, not dramatically better, but noticeably. More meat, white bread rather than the grey. A dish of preserved fruit that appears at the upper table on good days. You're at the lower table. You sit beside Beth, who is, today, more animated than usual. Beth is from a Surrey village called Bramley, which she describes as considerably smaller than Beccles and considerably flatter, and which she seems to miss with an intensity that has been, over the past 2 weeks, gradually converting from homesickness into a low-grade fuel that powers her through the days. She has the practical intelligence of someone who grew up youngest of 7 and has spent her whole life figuring out when to speak and when to be quiet. "The physician's coming Thursday," Beth says quietly, spooning pottage. "I heard." "Agnes says Lady Margaret is worse." A pause. "Nan says Agnes always says that." "What does Joan say?" Beth considers this. "Joan doesn't say anything about it." Which means it's either nothing or it's something Joan has decided not to discuss with people at your level. Either is possible. Both are always possible with Joan. "She slept better last night," you offer. Beth nods, eats. The pottage today is thick bean and barley with pieces of salt pork, the kind that's nearly a stew rather than a soup, that sticks to your ribs and sits warm in your stomach for hours. It's the right meal for November. Marjorie knows what the right meal for November is. Marjorie knows what the right meal for every month is, has probably been calibrating it for 20 years, adjusting the grain and the legumes and the salted meat based on some internal ledger that accounts for the season, the provisions, the mood of the household. You eat carefully. You have learned to eat carefully, not tentatively, not slowly, but with attention, to know what you're eating, to register the food as food. Some of the other girls eat quickly, anxiously, as if the food might be taken away. A habit from before they arrived here that the household's reliable supply hasn't entirely cured. Some eat mechanically, the way you move when you've been doing a task long enough that your body does it without you. You eat deliberately, which you've decided is the right approach. Knowing the warmth, knowing the filling, taking it in consciously, being fed rather than simply consuming. After the meal, there's a period that might generously be called a pause, maybe 15 minutes. The upper servants have a slightly longer pause. Joan disappears somewhere for 20 minutes every noon that nobody accounts for directly, but that everyone knows about and no one comments on. Father Edmund goes to the small chapel for his midday office. The upper cook's assistant sits in a corner of the kitchen and mends. You and Beth go to the back of the garden. This is an informal arrangement, not sanctioned, not explicitly forbidden. The garden in November is stripped down, the beds dug over, the herbs cut back, the paths muddy and cold. But it's empty. At noon, the garden is empty, and you've discovered that empty is a resource. Beth has a piece of chalk that she uses to practice letters on the garden wall. She's teaching herself to read. She has a small primer, borrowed from the chaplain who lent it to her with the mild approval of someone who believes in literacy, but is not going to do much to advance it personally. She traces letters carefully, her tongue slightly between her teeth, her face concentrated in a way that's nothing like the face she wears in the house. You watch the garden. There's a cat. There's always a cat in the garden. An old grey Tom who has been on the property so long he's achieved a kind of semi-official status, tolerated by everyone, owned by nobody. He's sitting in the pale November sun on top of the kitchen garden wall with the complete, meditative stillness of a creature that has no work to do and no one to answer to. You think, I should bring something to eat out here. Bread, something, anything. A reason to be in the garden rather than just the reason of wanting to be in the garden, because wanting to be somewhere is not, in this household, a recognised reason for being there. Then you think, what would I actually want to eat out here? Then you think, when did I last choose what I wanted to eat? Before Beccles, before the position, in your mother's kitchen, where the question of what to eat was not abundance but preference, where your mother would say, what's here is what's here, and you'd look at the larder and make something of it. The something being partly your own, partly the logic of what was available, but yours in the small ways that being in a kitchen where you belong makes things yours. You haven't been in a kitchen like that since October. You're not sad about this exactly. You knew what you were coming into, your mother explained it, and you understood, and you agreed, and you got on the cart. But there's a particular quality to what you're feeling now, standing in the cold garden watching the cat, that you don't have a word for yet and won't have a word for until you're considerably older and have something to compare it to. The quality of being a body in a place where the body belongs to the work. Beth finishes her letters. She looks at what she's written with an expression that mingles satisfaction and frustration in equal measure. How many can you do, you ask? All 26. But some of them I have to think about. Which ones? Q, she says immediately. Q never looks right. You both look at the Q on the garden wall. The Q does, objectively, look slightly uncertain of itself, as if it arrived at its current shape through a series of compromises. I think Q always looks like that, you say. Beth considers this. Maybe that's just Q. Time. You need to go back. The afternoon has its own list. There are rushes to be replenished in the main hall, the floor covering work that happens every week or two, pulling up the old rushes and putting down new ones, which sounds simple and is the opposite of simple. Let me tell you about rushes. The rushes on the floor of a great hall in Tudor England are not a decorative choice. They're not the equivalent of a nice rug or a polished floor. They are functional. They're insulating. A packed layer of dried rushes over stone flags keeps the cold from coming up through the floor, which in a hall this size, this cold, this exposed, makes a genuine difference to the temperature at ankle and knee height where people actually live. They're absorbent. Spills, dropped food, the incidental consequences of dogs and children and people carrying things, all of it disappears into the rushes where it remains until the rushes are changed. Mixed into the rushes are herbs, strewing herbs. This is a specific practice with a specific rationale. The herbs, crushed underfoot as people walk through, release fragrance that counters the smell of the old rushes, the absorbed spills, the dog evidence. Common strewing herbs include lavender, rosemary, mint, meadowsweet, chamomile, pennyroyal, hyssop, and the specific combination varies by season and preference, and what the kitchen garden currently has available. The smell of a freshly strewn hall, new rushes, herbs, clean stone, is genuinely lovely. It's one of the few smells in this house that registers as pleasure rather than neutrality. The smell of old rushes is the other thing. When the old rushes come up, and they need to come up periodically, maybe every 2 to 3 weeks in a well-run household, possibly less often in less well-run ones, what comes up with them is everything that's been dropped, dragged, trodden, and otherwise deposited on and into the floor covering over the past several weeks. There are levels to this. The top layer is merely worn rushes and the remnants of the herbs, brown and flat. Beneath that, a transitional zone that smells of the things absorbed. Beneath that, against the stone, the sediment. Broken food scraps, fallen wax, animal droppings, mud carried in from the courtyard on boots, and the occasional small object that fell and was lost. A button, once, that came up in the last rush change and that you set on the mantelpiece where it's been sitting ever since because nobody has claimed it. The smell when you pull up the rushes is immediate and comprehensive and does not respond well to holding your breath, because the volume of disturbed air is too great and you'll run out of held breath before you run out of floor. You develop a technique. Everyone who does this work develops a technique. Yours involves breathing through your mouth rather than your nose, which reduces but doesn't eliminate the information your body's receiving about the chemical composition of the air. You focus on the physical work, the rake to gather the loose rushes, the fork to lift them in bundles, the baskets to carry them to the disposal point in the far corner of the kitchen yard, where they'll eventually break down into compost or be burned. Burned is faster. Burned is what happens when the rushes are very old or very bad, or when the weather is dry enough to allow it. Today the weather is clear and cold enough to call dry, barely. The head houseman, a quiet man named Robert, who's been in charge of the hall's physical maintenance for 12 years, and who has the kind of competence that requires no announcement because it's evident in every surface he's responsible for, decides on burning. He makes this decision without discussion, which is how Robert makes all decisions, through a continuous private calculation that produces outputs without visible inputs. He points to the corner where the fire pit is. He begins the work. You and Beth and another girl, Cecily, who is older than both of you, and who moves with the solid efficiency of someone who has long since made peace with the work, assist. Each section of floor cleared, carried, deposited. The burning rushes smell of everything they've absorbed. This is not a pleasant smell. It is, however, a definitive one. Once the rushes are burning, the hall smells of fire rather than of what the fire is consuming, and fire smell is, compared to the alternative, an improvement. The new rushes come from the store beside the brewery. They are cut in late summer from the rush beds along the river and dried through September and October, tied into bundles, stacked in the cool dry air of the store where they smell of reeds and summer water and something clean and papery. Carrying them is a different kind of carrying from the ash and the water. Lighter, rustling, the sharp edges of the dried stems occasionally finding the gap between your sleeve and your glove. Joan strews the herbs from a basket, walking slowly back and forth across the freshly laid floor, her arms swinging in a practiced arc. Lavender today, dried from the garden, and something else. Rosemary, crushed between her fingers as she walks, releasing the sharp, clean smell. The hall, when it's done, smells like a garden in summer, for about an hour. Then the household walks back in, and it starts to become the hall again. This is how it is. Nothing stays clean. Nothing stays good smelling. Everything requires continuous maintenance, the thing you do today undone by tomorrow's traffic, the rushes you lay down in November worn and fragrant by December, pulled up and burned by January. The house is a continuous project. The work is never done because the work is not oriented toward completion. It's oriented toward maintenance, toward keeping the standard, toward the state of being adequate to the requirements of the household, which is a moving target because the household is alive, and alive things make messes. You understand this more deeply with every passing week. In the afternoon you have a task that is new. Joan tells you about it at the end of the rush laying. while you're both carrying the empty herb baskets back to the storeroom. Agnes needs someone tomorrow morning, Joan says, to help with the close stool. Her back is bad. You say nothing. You'll carry the bowl down to the kitchen garden. Agnes will show you the first time. You say yes, Joan. This is promotion of a kind, or proximity rather. Being trusted with Lady Margaret's close stool bowl, even in the absence of Agnes, even as cover for Agnes's bad back, is a step up from the House of Office. Not far up, but up. Joan read something in your face that you didn't intend to show. It's the same as any other, she says, not unkindly. You carry it, you empty it, you rinse it, you bring it back. The only difference is it goes somewhere specific and you don't talk about it. I understand. Agnes will show you. You wonder about Agnes's back. You wonder if Agnes's back is actually bad, or if Agnes has decided, for reasons of her own, to put you in proximity to Lady Margaret's arrangements and see how you handle it. You wonder this without being able to resolve it, because you don't know Agnes well enough yet to read her accurately. What you know about Agnes is that she's been in this household since she was your age, and she has, in that time, developed into something that is almost a feature of the house itself. Permanent, functional, not exactly warm, but not unkind, doing her job with the same quiet efficiency as everything else, and making no claims on the world beyond it. Tomorrow you'll carry the bowl. Tonight there are other things. The afternoon has brought a delivery, a cart from London, supplies ordered by the steward, the kind of replenishment that happens every week or two. Most of it goes directly to the stores. Barrels, boxes, sacks, each one checked against the steward's list by the steward himself, who stands in the courtyard in his black wool coat holding his ledger and directing the kitchen boys as they carry things with the serene authority of someone who has never in his life had to carry anything himself. Part of the delivery is for Lady Margaret, specific items. Agnes has a list. You are sent to help carry them to the still room, which is off the east wing, a small room with shelves and a small fire that Agnes oversees personally. Here are stored the prepared medicines and cosmetics and personal items that are specifically Lady Margaret's. Rose water, a preparation of something that smells of violets. Several small packets wrapped in paper whose contents you don't know and don't ask about. The still room is where you see, for the first time, the system from a slightly different angle. On the highest shelf above the rose water and the violet preparation, a bottle, dark glass, sealed with wax. Below it, wrapped in linen, what look like folded cloths, fresh-washed, softly mounded. The cloths for the close stool. Agnes takes them down, checks them, resets them in their basket with the small pot of rose preparation that you noticed on your first morning. You know what these are for, Agnes says, not a question. Yes. When you bring the basin up, she says, you carry both baskets. Both, not just the bowl. Yes. And you don't leave them in the corridor. You come in, you set down the clean things, you pick up the used bowl, you go out. Yes. And you don't, she pauses. You're quiet about it. You understand this. The used bowl should not clatter, should not be held out from the body in a way that makes its contents visually evident, should be carried with the cover on, with the same care and neutrality you'd carry any vessel, as if you were delivering breakfast rather than removing its eventual consequence. The invisible made invisible twice over. You nod. Agnes looks at you for a moment with the same slightly calculating expression she sometimes has. Then she goes back to the shelves. You're doing well, she says, to the shelves rather than to you. Joan says so. This is, you understand, very high praise. Evening comes fast in November. The light dies by 4 and the house seals itself against the dark. Candles lit, fires built up, shutters drawn over the small windows. The quality of the world inside the house changes at this point, becomes more interior, more dense, the external world replaced by the glowing amber of candlelight and firelight. Your work in the evening is the fire in Lady Margaret's room. She'll be there. Awake, probably. She's been spending her evenings in the chair by the fire, propped with cushions, with the particular stillness of someone who is managing an illness by not fighting it but by containing it. Agnes sits with her in the evenings, and sometimes one of the tiring women, and sometimes Sir William's eldest daughter, Cecily. Not the same Cecily as the housemaid. This is Cecily Lacey, 17, who has her mother's thin, pale face, and her father's decisive manner, and who comes and goes with the proprietary ease of someone who belongs in every room of the house. Tonight, when you come in to tend the fire, it's Agnes and Cecily Lacey and Lady Margaret in the chair. You come in quietly, go to the fire, add 2 of the good logs, banking them carefully so the fire will burn steadily for the next 2 hours. The fireplace tools are heavy, the iron tongs, the poker, the small brush for the hearth. You use them efficiently, making the smallest possible impact on the room's atmosphere. Lady Margaret doesn't speak to you. She rarely does. You're not, in the hierarchy of this room, something she needs to address directly. You're a function being performed. The way the fire itself is a function. The way the rushes on the floor are a function. But as you're banking the fire, adjusting the last log, you hear her voice. Low, directed at Agnes or at Cecily, words you're not meant to catch. Is the account from the physician for Tuesday still? Agnes says something quiet in response, and Lady Margaret. Then I'll need the bowl again in the morning. And Agnes. Alice will bring it. A pause, and then Lady Margaret, to you directly, without turning her head, her voice neither warm nor cold, entirely matter of fact. Good. Just that. One word. You finish with the fire. You straighten up. You're not sure whether to acknowledge the word or whether acknowledging it would be the wrong kind of visible. You take the middle path. A small inclination of the head, not quite a bow. The slight dip of acknowledgement that you've seen Joan use when Lady Margaret says something that requires response but not conversation. And then you leave. In the corridor, carrying the ash brush and the hearth tools back to their storage place, you notice that your heart is beating slightly faster than it was before you've been addressed, directly by Lady Margaret, about a task, a specific task, a task that is, in the hierarchy of tasks in this household, one of the most intimate. This is the strange mathematics of service. The closer you are to the most private functions of power, the more significant your position. The groom of the stool, if you knew about this, and you don't, because you're 14 and from Beccles, the groom of the stool at the royal household is one of the most prestigious positions at court, precisely because he or she attends the king at the most private moment of the day. To be trusted with a person's bodily functions is to be trusted utterly. It is paradoxically a mark of standing. You don't know this in so many words, but you feel the shape of it. You feel that something has shifted by 1 degree, and that the shift is, on balance, in a direction you'd rather go. Joan is waiting for you at the end of the corridor. Supper, she says. You go. Supper is quieter than the noon meal, smaller, less ceremony, the day's energy mostly spent. You eat bread and cold meat and a dish of preserved plums that are sweet and slightly too soft but welcome. The candles on the servants' table are tallow, not beeswax, but they're bright enough, and the fire in the hall is still going, and for the first time today your feet are actually warm. Beth tells you about something she overheard in the corridor near the steward's office. Something about a letter from Sir William. Something about money. She relays it with the careful neutrality of someone reporting information without interpreting it, which is the correct approach. Interpreting news above your station is another of those invisible rules, the ones you learn by watching what happens when they're broken. You listen, you note it, you don't say what you think about it. After supper the girls go upstairs. Cecily, the housemaid, who is, you're learning, funnier than she looks, with a dry observational eye that she deploys rarely but effectively, makes a comment about the old rushes that makes Beth laugh properly. A real laugh, not the polite kind, and you find yourself laughing too. And for 30 seconds the three of you are standing at the top of the stairs laughing about something that you'd have no way to explain to anyone who hadn't spent the last several hours doing exactly what you'd been doing. Then quiet. The room. The cold. The candle. Joan has a privilege, a candle stub in the evenings, just long enough to read a little before sleeping. She has a small book, a book of hours, old, the pages worn at the edges, that she reads by the candle, her lips moving slightly. This is a private thing, the reading. You've never commented on it, and she's never explained it, but you've developed the sense that the book is to Joan what the garden wall is to Beth. A place that's yours, a small territory of self in the larger territory of the household. You don't have a book. You can read barely. Your father taught you your letters and you know the catechism and you can puzzle out simple text if you go slowly. But reading for pleasure is not yet something you've developed the machinery for. In Beacles, books were rare and mostly borrowed and mostly about God. What you do in the evenings, in the few minutes before sleep, is look at the small square of sky visible through the narrow window in your room. The window faces north, or something like north. Tonight there are stars. The sky has cleared after the overcast of the afternoon, and through the narrow pane you can see a strip of black with a few bright points. You know the names of a few stars. Your father knew them, not the formal names, the shepherd names, the plough, the 7 sisters, the bright one in the north that doesn't move. He'd show you from the garden on clear nights in winter, pointing up, the names coming out in the same Suffolk accent that you have, and that has already, in 3 weeks, begun to sound out of place in this household. The bright one in the north, that's there. You look at it for a moment. Your father died in February from a fever that came on in 4 days and was over in 7. Quick. Your mother said quick as a mercy, and you believed her, and you still believe her, and you also know that quick doesn't mean the absence of everything that comes after it, all the ways a person's absence becomes an everyday absence, a feature of every ordinary moment. He would have been pleased about the position. He was always more optimistic than he had reason to be. You close your eyes. The house makes its night sounds. The deep creak of the timbers, the distant sound of someone in the kitchen banking the fire, the quiet that is the particular quiet of a large building in which most of the people are asleep. Somewhere outside, far off, something owl or night bird. Sleep. The morning comes as the morning always comes. The church bell somewhere, the dark, the cold, the need to get up. But this morning is different by 1 degree. This morning you have the bowl. Agnes is already awake when Joan wakes you. Awake and in her cap and standing in the corridor with the expression of someone who has agreed to a thing and is committed to it, but would like it noted that she agreed to it. Come, she says, you follow her. Not to the still room this time. Upstairs, the upper corridor, the heavy dark wood of the door to Lady Margaret's room. Agnes knocks, waits, opens the door. The room is dim. One candle on the mantelpiece, the fire reduced to embers but still glowing. Lady Margaret is awake. You can see the pale shape of her face against the dark pillow. Agnes goes directly to the close stool. She opens the velvet cover, lifts it from the box, and the smell that comes out is managed, contained, perfumed, over but present, the reality of a body asserting itself through the layer of rose preparation and soft linen. She lifts the pewter bowl out with both hands, carries it to you, hands it over. The bowl is warm, not hot, not recently used. There's been time for the warmth to settle to ambient, but warm with the warmth of close-kept things. The cover, a pewter disc, sits on top. The weight is what it is. You hold it with both hands, cover on, level, carry it the way Agnes showed you in the still room, not held away from the body like something dangerous, not held close like something precious, just carried neutrally, purposefully, out the door, down the back stairs. The back stairs in this house are narrow enough that you descend with care, your feet finding each step deliberately, the bowl held steady. The staircase is dark except for the light from a single rushlight at the bottom landing. You count 14 steps. You've counted them before. At the bottom, left turn, past the pastry kitchen, out the side door, across the kitchen yard to the garden. There's a specific point in the kitchen garden, along the far wall, where there's a small covered drain built into the ground. This is not the House of Office drain. This is for liquid disposal from the still room and the kitchen, and now Agnes's morning trip. You lift the cover of the drain, remove the pewter bowl's cover, and empty the bowl carefully into the drain. The cold air takes the smell, makes it temporary. You rinse the bowl with water from the small jug Agnes pressed into your free hand before you left. Dry it on the cloth that's hooked to the drain cover for exactly this purpose. Replace the cloth. Replace the drain cover. Turn around. The garden is empty. Cold. The frost is on the bed still. The brown dried stems of the cut-back plants standing stiffly. The earth between them pale and hard. A blackbird is in the far corner, moving through the leaf debris under the garden wall with the focused concentration of something searching for something. You stand for a moment. The bowl is in your hands, clean, empty, warm from the rinse water. Above the garden wall, the sky is that particular pale blue-grey of early winter morning, the blue that happens when the air is cold enough to be visible. The sun isn't up yet, but the sky is telling you it's on its way. A faint lightening toward the east, behind the house, filtering through the gap between rooftops. In the house behind you, 400 people are waking up. The fires need tending, the water needs carrying, the rushes need checking. Lady Margaret needs dressing, the breakfast needs laying, the steward's ledger needs updating, the flour needs measuring, the wood needs cutting, the ash needs clearing, the hay needs replacing and the bench with 3 holes. The bowl in your hands is clean and light. The day hasn't decided yet what it's going to be. You go back in. I need to tell you something about this house. Not about Lady Margaret or Sir William or Agnes or Joan. About the house itself. About what it was built of and what that building required. This house, which is not Hampton Court, which is not Hereford Castle, which is not any of the famous ones, is a house of moderate wealth, maybe 60 years old at the point where you're living in it. It has 38 rooms. It has 4 main fireplaces, 12 secondary ones, 2 external kitchens, a brew house, a bake house, a dairy, and a laundry. It has stables for 14 horses. It has a chapel. It has a garden, and a kitchen garden, and a small orchard. It also has, built into its fabric in ways you're still discovering, a complete system for the management of the people who live in it and the waste those people generate. Every building of this size has this system. Every building of this size must have this system, because without it, 400 people and their animals and their fires and their food would produce in a very short time conditions incompatible with habitation. The moat that surrounds the outer portion of the house is not primarily decorative and not primarily defensive at this point in history in this part of England. The moat is part of the sanitation system. The garderobe in the east wing drops into the moat. Controlled, managed. The moat is periodically flushed by the diversion of the stream. In winter, when the stream slows, the smell in the east wing garderobe is denser. This is a known fact that the household manages by keeping windows in that corridor closed, the kitchen yard drain. The system of drains under the kitchen yard that carries away the grease and washing water and other kitchen waste runs down through a culverted channel to a point in the outer wall where it exits the property. This culvert was built when the house was built. Someone 60 years ago thought about water running away and built a channel for it to run in. This is practical engineering of a kind that is everywhere in old houses if you know to look for it. The cesspit beneath the kitchen yard, dug deep, lined with brick, periodically emptied by the men who come in the night, the gong farmers, the nightmen, who are paid well for work that nobody else will do. They come in summer when the smell is at its worst and the cesspit is at its fullest. They come at night because the work is not work that's done in daylight. They carry what they carry away on carts and take it to farms that will pay for it as fertilizer, and the farms are downwind of the city and the arrangement works. The last time the gong farmers came was August. You weren't here in August. But Joan described it to you, not in detail, briefly, as a matter of household knowledge. They come, they work through the night, they go. You don't speak to them. You close the kitchen door and let them work. This is what's underneath the house. This is what the velvet and the tapestries and the beeswax candles and the perfumed close-stool cloths are organised, in part, to address. The fundamental biological reality of bodies, managed through a combination of architecture, labour, hierarchy, and the specific kind of silence that exists around the things everyone does and nobody discusses. In Tudor England, nobody's confused about where waste goes. It doesn't go to a magic nowhere. It goes to the moat, to the cesspit, to the kitchen drain, to the field behind the house. It goes somewhere specific that someone has thought about and built for. The system exists. It works imperfectly, which is why the House of Office smells the way it does in winter. But it works. What the system does, equally, is distribute the awareness of where things go. The further up the hierarchy you are, the more insulated you are from the where. Lady Margaret does not know what the drain in the kitchen garden connects to, or how deep the cesspit is, or what the gong farmers look like, or what they charge. She knows, in abstract, that these things exist. She doesn't need to know more. That's what the hierarchy is for. That's what Agnes is for. That's what you are for. And on the bottom end of the hierarchy, you know exactly where everything goes. You know the distance between the House of Office and the cesspit drain because you walk it every morning. You know what the rake against the channel feels like because you feel it every morning. You know the smell. This is knowledge as a consequence of position, not a privilege of it. The knowledge goes down the same direction as the waste. Thursday, the physician comes. His name is Dr. Fletcher. He's a man of 40-something with a physician's habitual assessment expression, looking at things, including people, with a slight narrowing of the eyes that says, "I am determining something about you, and I'll tell you what it is when I've finished." He arrives by horse with a servant, hands the horse off to the stable boy, and comes directly into the house through the front door because Dr. Fletcher uses the front door. He goes up to Lady Margaret. The household hovers. This is not visible hovering. Nobody stands in the corridor outside Lady Margaret's door listening, but the attention of the house is oriented toward the east wing, where Lady Margaret is, where Dr. Fletcher is, where the next piece of information about her condition will emerge. You are carrying wood when he comes out again. 3 logs of the good dry kind, in the carrying cloth over your shoulder, going toward the secondary stair that leads to the rooms above the great hall where Sir William's mother's room is, because Sir William's mother, who is not currently in residence, has a fireplace that is maintained even in her absence as a matter of household standard that nobody has explicitly explained, but that simply exists as a practice. Dr. Fletcher passes you in the corridor. He doesn't look at you. You're carrying wood. You're a function. But you hear him say to the steward who is walking him toward the front door, "More rest, less moving about. The decoction I've left with Agnes, twice a day, and no cold." A pause. "The humours are out of balance, a cold and damp condition. The air in the room must be kept warm and dry. More fire, which means more wood, which means more trips up and down the back stairs." You note this with the part of your brain that is always running the household logic in the background, the constant calculation of what's needed and when and from where. Lady Margaret's room, more fire. Good, you know how to do that. 2 days later, Sir William comes back from London. He arrives in the late afternoon, his horse lathered from fast riding, 2 men behind him, and something in his manner when he hands off the horse that is not quite his usual manner. Not worse, not alarming, but different by a degree. The men around him can feel it. You can feel it from across the courtyard, which is how these things transmit in households, not through information, but through atmosphere. The steward meets him at the door. They go in together. The door closes. In the kitchen, Marjorie begins, without any instruction, to prepare things a degree more carefully than usual. The bread that was going to be set aside for tomorrow is instead kept for tonight. The meat is adjusted. When Sir William is worried, he eats. Not excessively, not obviously, but there's a kind of consolidation that happens in his relationship to food when the external world is complicated. Marjorie has been here 20 years. She knows this about him the way you know things about people who are present in your life every day, without there being any formal acknowledgement of the knowledge. Supper that evening is elaborate by household standards. The servants' table has good bread and a roasted bird, a chicken, small but real, and a dish of something with dried fruit that is better than usual. Marjorie doesn't explain this. She never explains this. You eat the chicken and feel, faintly, that the household is being provisioned against something, the way you might check the provisions before a storm. After supper, Joan speaks to you in the corridor. Sir William is going to London again Sunday. He's taking Agnes. This is significant. Agnes going to London means Agnes's duties in the house devolve, at least partly, down, which means you. For how long? Not long. A week, possibly. Lady Margaret needs someone. You understand. Lady Margaret needs someone who can attend to the close stool while Agnes is away. Someone trusted. Someone who has already carried the bowl. The still room, Joan says. Agnes will show you everything before she goes. I understand. Joan looks at you the way she occasionally looks at you, with an expression that's not quite warmth, but is something in that direction, a controlled acknowledgement of something seen. You're steadier than the last girl, she says. What happened to the last girl? Left in her third week. Said the house was too big. A pause. She wasn't wrong, she goes. You stand in the corridor for a moment thinking about the girl who left in her third week. You try to imagine who she was, where she came from, what it was about this house that exceeded her capacity. You're not judging her. In your first week you came closer than you'd like to admit to the same decision, not through any single thing, but through the cumulative weight of it, the coldness and the early rising and the house of office and the never being in any room as anything other than a body performing a function, and the understanding, settling deeper with each day, that this was not something that would ease significantly for years. You stayed, partly for the wage, which is real, and which goes partly to your mother who has no other income now, partly because you're determined in a way that is more a characteristic than a decision, the determination that your father had, the kind that doesn't make speeches, that simply continues regardless of how things feel, partly because the house, 3 weeks in, has started to become known to you. You know the back stairs, you know which corridor leads where, you know Joan's face in its different modes, you know Marjorie's rhythms, you know where the ash pile is and where the cesspit drain is and what the garderobe smells like compared to the house of office, and which of the stable boys will help you carry something heavy without being asked, and which one will look the other direction. Knowing a place is not the same as belonging to it, but it's something. It's the first thing. The weeks move in their rhythm. More carrying, more ash, more house of office, more fire, more water. Lady Margaret's health fluctuates. Better on warm days, worse when the November cold drives deep into the east wing. The physician comes again. More decoctions, more fire. Agnes prepares for London with the focused efficiency with which she does everything. She spends an afternoon in the still room going through the arrangements with you, specifically in detail the morning routine, the basin, the close stool, the order of operations. She'll ring if she needs something in the night, Agnes says. There's a bell pulled beside the bed. You'll hear it from your room. I'll hear it, Agnes looks at you, if you sleep lightly enough. You're not sure whether this is a warning or an instruction. You decide to treat it as both. Her routines don't change, Agnes continues. She wakes early, she likes the fire built before she gets up, but not blazing. A steady fire, not too hot. She prefers the water for washing on the warm side, not hot. The close stool cloth. She shows you the small pot of rose preparation. A small amount, not too much. You note everything. You have a good memory for practical details. It's one of the things Joan has observed, one of the things that has elevated you in 3 weeks from the absolute bottom to a position one step up. She doesn't like talking in the mornings, Agnes says. She won't speak to you. That's not rudeness. That's how she is. I understand. She might ask you something occasionally. A pause. Answer directly. Don't elaborate. Yes. Agnes closes the still room carefully, checks the latch. You'll do well, she says, not warmly, conclusively. Sunday. Agnes and Sir William go to London. The house adjusts to their absence the way all large systems adjust to the removal of key components, with a slight increase in friction, a slight redistribution of responsibility, a temporary renegotiation of who does what. Nothing catastrophic, everything continuing. Monday morning you wake before the bell. Not by much. 10 minutes. Maybe. Just enough to lie in the dark, feeling your body assembled around the fact of the day, feeling the tasks arranged in front of you in their sequence. House of office, fire, water, Lady Margaret. You do the house of office quickly, in the cold, your breath visible and your feet numb within 2 minutes, the hay and the moss in order, the channel raked, the bucket to the drain. Done. Fire in Lady Margaret's room. 3 of the good logs, the dry ones, added to the embers so carefully that you don't even creak the grate. The fire takes. The light in the room shifts from the grey of dawn to the amber of burning wood. The warmth begins, slowly, to build. Water. Up from the kitchen, the heavy jug in both hands, the 14 steps of the back staircase counted silently. The ewer filled, the basin ready. You stand at the door. From inside, nothing. The particular nothing of someone awake but still. You knock. Come. Lady Margaret's voice in the early morning is different from her afternoon voice. Lower, more carefully deployed. The voice of someone who is managing an energy that requires management. You come in. Set down the basin. Check the fire. It's building well, the room already warmer than the corridor. Move the small table that holds the washstand slightly closer to the fire, the way Agnes told you Lady Margaret prefers it in the mornings. Lady Margaret is upright in the bed. She's wearing a nightgown of pale linen, heavy and long, with a cap over her hair. Her face in the early light is thinner than it looks by candlelight, the illness showing differently in the morning, the skin slightly transparent at the temples. She looks at you. "You're Alice," she says. "Yes, my lady." She accepts this, doesn't elaborate. She watches you check the fire and the water with the slight narrowed attention. That is, you're beginning to understand simply how she looks at things. Not critical, not cold, just observant. The woman who notices everything. "Agnes trusts you," she says. You're not sure whether this is a question or an observation. You say nothing, which is, you've learned, often the correct response to statements delivered in this tone. "Good," she says. She gets up. You go to the close-stool. Let me be precise about what this moment requires, because it requires more than the practical. It requires the particular kind of attention that good service demands, the attention that is simultaneously present and absent, that sees everything and comments on nothing, that moves efficiently without creating the sense of being watched. You've been thinking about this since Agnes told you you'd be doing it. Not anxiously, but practically, in the way you think through new tasks. You've broken it into its components. The cover, open, then close. The basin inside, remove when ready, replace after. The cloths, fresh from the basket, positioned correctly. Simple, practical. But the room is small, and Lady Margaret is in it, and the work is the work it is. You do it. Lady Margaret attends to herself with the matter-of-fact efficiency of someone who's been doing this every morning of her life in this way, and has no particular feelings about it beyond the interest in it being done correctly. She does not speak. She does not look at you. She is, as Agnes promised, simply present. You are simultaneously present and not. You face the fire while the close stool is in use. You're aware, through sound and peripheral attention, of what's happening. You're not watching, you're available. When the time comes, you take the bowl. Down the back stairs, 14 steps, left turn, side door, across the kitchen garden to the drain. The morning is cold and clear. Frost on the bed still, though the sun is finding the top of the east wall and starting to warm it. The blackbird is in the corner again, or a different blackbird, you can't tell, doing the same patient search. You empty the bowl, rinse it, dry it, stand for a moment in the cold. You think, this is what people don't think about when they think about service. Not the distance between their position and the mistress's position. Not the difference in their clothes or their food or their beds or their access to warmth. Not even the work itself in the abstract, but this, the specific material intimacy of being the person who carries the bowl, the person who knows, the person who is trusted enough to know and discreet enough that the knowing never becomes a problem. There is a thing called dignity that people at the bottom of hierarchies sometimes seem, from the outside, to have sacrificed. The outside view is wrong. The dignity is there. It's just structured differently. It lives not in what you're exempt from doing, but in how you do what you do, in the care that you bring, in the steadiness, in the carrying of the bowl with both hands, cover on, neutral, purposeful, down 14 steps and across the frozen garden to the drain. In the fact that you've been here for a month, and the household is working, and Lady Margaret called you by your name, you go back inside. The weeks after Agnes leaves for London arrange themselves in a pattern that is different from the first pattern. Not easier or harder, but different. The tasks are the same, but the context has shifted, and the same tasks in a different context feel like a different engagement with the world. You have direct access to Lady Margaret's room every morning. This means you see her more than most of the household sees her. You see her in the morning before she's arranged herself for the day, before Agnes would have arranged her. The careful business of dress and hair, and the face managed for presentation. You see her at the edge of herself, where the illness and the effort of containing the illness are more visible. She's reading a great deal. There are books on the table beside her chair, real books bound in leather with printed pages, the kind that in your household in Beccles existed in the abstract as things that existed in other people's houses. She reads in the evenings mostly, and sometimes in the mornings when the light is good, and she makes notes occasionally in a small notebook using a pen and ink that she keeps on the writing table. You don't ask what she's reading. You don't look at the books long enough to read the titles, although you could, probably with some effort. This is part of the privacy. Her reading is hers. The inside of her mind is hers. You manage the physical room. The room's interior life belongs to her. But once, coming in with the midday water, a new task, ordered by Lady Margaret through Joan, who relayed it as Lady Margaret requires water at noon as well as morning. You set the jug down and she says, without looking up from her book, "Have you ever read Plutarch?" You say, "No, my lady." She says, "He writes about great men, about what makes them great and what destroys them." A pause. He's more interesting about the second thing. You stand very still, jug set down, not sure whether this is a conversation or a statement. She looks up. Her eyes in the noon light are a pale grey-brown, lighter than you expected. "You can read?" she says. "A little, my lady. The catechism and simple texts." She looks at you for a moment, then back at the book. "Joan says you're steady," she says. "I try to be, my lady." "Good." She turns a page. "That's rarer than people think." You leave, carrying the empty water jug, 14 steps back down the back stairs. You think about Plutarch for the rest of the afternoon. In the evenings, with the fire maintained and Lady Margaret settled, you have an hour that's yours. Joan still has her candle and her book of hours. Beth still has her chalk letters on the wall. You've started without much deliberation to read. There's a small collection of papers in the servants' hall, a printed almanac, 3 years old, a ballad sheet from some event in London, and a religious pamphlet that Father Edmund gave Joan 2 years ago, and that Joan never read but hasn't thrown away. You've read the almanac. The almanac is full of information about the weather, the stars, the correct times to plant and harvest and bleed patients, which you don't need to know, and which you read anyway, because reading's a muscle you're discovering, something that gets stronger as you use it. You read slowly, moving your lips slightly. The lamplight in the servants' hall is not good. A single tallow rushlight on the table. But it's something. The almanac says, in its matter-of-fact voice, that the best time to harvest rushes for floor strewing is in August, when the rushes are at their fullest growth, and that they should be dried in a covered area away from direct sun to preserve their colour and flexibility. You think, I laid new rushes today. You think, someone cut these rushes in August. Someone dried them. Someone bundled them and brought them here. And before that, someone planned the rush beds that grow along the property river, planted them or preserved them from natural growth, managed them so that every August there are rushes to cut. This chain of people, all of them managing pieces of the system that allows 400 people to live in this house with clean floors. This is the thing about a great household in 1547. It's a complete system, almost entirely self-contained. It makes its own bread, brews its own ale, cuts its own rushes, keeps its own accounts, maintains its own buildings. It has its own chapel and its own chaplain. It has its own physician periodically. It provides for its own dead. The household buries its servants in the church associated with the property, with prayers said by Father Edmund, with a marker of some kind for those who'd been long enough in service to have established an identity beyond their function. This completeness means that the household is in some ways entire. It's a small world, and like all worlds, it has its own rules about what's visible and what isn't, what's spoken and what's understood, what's managed, and what's endured. The rules around the body and its needs are among the most consistent. They don't vary much across Tudor households, or across the century, or across much of European history up to this point. The same calculation. Powerful people's bodies are managed through the labour of less powerful people, and that labour is made as invisible as possible, and the invisibility is maintained because visibility would require acknowledging that what's being managed is the same thing, regardless of the station of the person it's being managed for. You know this now. 3 weeks ago you didn't know it. A month from now you'll know it so completely that you'll have stopped knowing it as a distinct fact. The way you've stopped noticing the tallow candle smell. It'll have become part of the texture of your understanding of the world, below the level of articulation. This is how things that are true become impossible to say out loud, not through suppression, through absorption. The problem with Agnes being in London is that it's cold. Specifically, Lady Margaret, without Agnes's daily attention, and with more rest required by Dr. Fletcher's instructions, is in her room more than usual. More fire more constantly. More wood carried up. More ash carried down. More of your trips up and down the back stairs, which are narrow and cold and have a low beam at the bottom, that you've cracked your head on twice now, leaving a sore spot on your right temple that's been there for a week. More water. Lady Margaret's consumption of hot water has increased since the cold weather set in. Not for washing specifically, but for a preparation of hot water and dried herbs that she drinks throughout the day, kept warm in a small covered vessel on the hearth. This requires water heated in the kitchen and carried up and kept warm and refreshed every few hours. You carry this up and down alongside everything else. The bowl, every morning. The fire, twice a day now. Morning and midday, a maintenance addition rather than a full building. The water, morning and noon and sometimes afternoon. By the end of the first week of Agnes's absence, your arms have developed a new quality of tiredness. Not the muscle tiredness of using a muscle hard, but the deep-settled tiredness of continuous low-level effort, of carrying things that are just heavy enough to matter, just often enough to accumulate. Your shoulders have stopped complaining about it and started simply expecting it, the way you might stop noticing a sound in a room you're in all day. Joan notices. Joan, who notices everything and comments on approximately 12% of what she notices, stops you in the corridor one afternoon. Come and eat something. This is not lunch. It's 3 in the afternoon. Joan takes you to the kitchen, where Marjorie, wordlessly, without being asked, which means Joan spoke to Marjorie in advance, puts a piece of bread and a cup of warm ale in front of you. You sit, you eat. Joan stands by the fire with her own cup, saying nothing, and for 5 minutes you exist in the rare state of being fed in the middle of a working day, without any purpose other than being fed. Thank you, you say when you finish. Joan looks at you over her cup. Agnes is back Monday, she says. You've done well. You nod. Lady Margaret said something, a pause. Joan is choosing words with her usual economy. She said you're careful. Careful. You turn this over. Is that... You start. It's good, Joan says, from her. You go back to work. Agnes comes back on Monday as promised. She comes back with Sir William, who comes back from London with the same slightly altered manner as before, but steadier this time, less storm, more settled. Whatever he went to address has been, if not resolved, at least defined. The household relaxes by another degree. Agnes assesses the still room with the eye of a returning householder, going through the baskets and the shelves, checking. She doesn't say anything is wrong, which means nothing is wrong. She looks at you once, briefly. Lady Margaret said you were quiet, she says. I tried to be. Good. This is the complete evaluation. Agnes resumes her position in the household with the same frictionless efficiency with which everything Agnes does is done, and your role reverts to its usual scope, the bowl taken back by Agnes, your regular tasks. But something is different, and it's not different in the external structure of the household, which is largely unchanged. It's different in the interior structure of your own position, which has shifted by a degree, not upward exactly, not in any formal or acknowledged way, but inward, toward the centre of trust. You've been carrying things in this house for 2 months. You've learnt the weight of wood and water and ash and the bowl. You've learned the back stairs and the still room and the kitchen drain, and the chain from Lady Margaret's room to the drain and back. You've learned the smell of the house in its different moods. The good day smell of beeswax and herbs and roasting meat. The bad day smell of old rushes and the east wing garderobe on a still day. The particular cold fire smell of a room that has been unused. The smell of Lady Margaret's room when the illness is worse. You know where things go. You know how they get there. December comes. The cold intensifies into the real cold. The cold that means business. Frost on the inside of the window glass in your room every morning. The basin water frozen. Your breath visible from the moment you're awake. The rushes in the main hall are changed again. The ash piles in the yard grow larger. The kitchen fires are kept higher, and the fuel consumption concerns the steward, who appears in the kitchen one afternoon with his ledger and his expression of polite anxiety to confer with Marjorie about wood allocations. Marjorie confers with the expression of someone who's been conferred with many times and is prepared to be conferred with indefinitely while doing exactly what she was going to do anyway. The fires remain where they are. In December, the gong farmers come. You don't see them. You're not supposed to. You know they've been because in the morning after they come, there's a specific quality to the kitchen yard. An absence rather than a presence, a removal, a kind of institutional sigh of relief that manifests in nothing particular, but which the people who've been in the house through previous years recognise immediately. The steward is slightly less tightly wound than usual. Marjorie's movements in the kitchen have a slightly more settled quality. The cesspit is empty. The system is reset. You understand this the way you understand most things in this house now, practically, as information about how the world works. This is in fact the larger lesson that 2 months in a Tudor household has been teaching you, the lesson that runs underneath all the specific skills and all the specific tasks. The world works, not perfectly, not justly, not by any straightforward measure, not cleanly, not in ways that would survive close examination by someone who arrived here with the expectation of justice or cleanliness. But it works. The fires keep burning. The food keeps coming. Lady Margaret is ill, but she's attended to. The cesspit fills and is emptied. The rushes wear out and are replaced. The water is carried. The system is maintained by people like you. People who are carrying things, running up and down back stairs, navigating the complicated politics of status and visibility and the management of need. In the spring, when the weather turns and the kitchen garden comes back and there are fresh herbs for strewing again, you'll have been here 7 months. Long enough to be not new. Long enough to have learned the name of every person in the household, the name of every horse in the stable, the name of the grey tom in the garden. Long enough for the back stairs to be something you can navigate in total darkness without counting. But that's the spring. This is December. Tonight the household is quiet. The upper servants are settled. Lady Margaret is resting. Her fire maintained, her medicines taken, her room warm and dry as Dr. Fletcher required. The lower hall has supped, and the boards are being cleared, and somewhere in the kitchen Mary the scullery girl is washing the last of the pots, with the resigned efficiency of someone who knows the pots will need washing again tomorrow, and every day after that until something changes, and nothing is going to change. You're in the corridor outside the still room carrying the last water jug of the day back to the kitchen when you hear the bell. It's faint. From upstairs. The small bell Agnes described, the bell pull beside Lady Margaret's bed. Agnes is down in the main hall. Joan is with her. You're the one in the corridor. You go up. Lady Margaret's room is warm, the fire burning steadily. She's in the chair, not in bed. She sometimes stays up later now. The physician, having said the rest, need not be complete bed rest, just managed rest. The candle on the table beside her is burning low. The book is closed on her lap. She looks up when you come in. The fire, she says. It needs... She stops. She's looking at your face, which is probably showing something from the exertion of the stairs. Sit down a moment, she says. This is not something she has said before. Sitting is not something you do in Lady Margaret's room. You hesitate. There's a stool, she says, indicating the small stool near the fire that's used for the fireside work. Sit. You sit. She looks at you for a moment with that observant, narrowed expression. You've been up and down those stairs 3 times in the last hour, she says. You say nothing. I've been counting, she says. She has, you realise. The sound of the back stairs is audible from her room through the wall. She knows your footsteps. She's been listening to the housework while she reads her Plutarch. "Add the log," she says. "Then sit for a moment." You add the log. You sit. The fire takes the new log and builds. The room is warm. The candle is burning low but not yet out. Lady Margaret opens her book. For a few minutes neither of you speaks. She reads. You sit. Outside the window the December night is black and completely still. The kind of still that means frost rather than weather. "Agnes said you're good with the close-stool," Lady Margaret says without looking up. "I tried to be, my lady." "She said you're discreet." "Yes, my lady." A pause. She turns a page. "That's worth more than people think," she says. "Discretion." You say, "Yes, my lady." "It's a skill." Another page. "Not everyone has it. Agnes has it. Joan has it. Most people—" She pauses. "Most people find it very difficult not to let what they know shape how they behave. Toward you." A slight shift in her voice. "It's human, but it makes things complicated." You understand exactly what she's saying. The close-stool, the bowl, the knowledge. "I don't think about it beyond the work," you say. She looks up. For a moment you're not sure if this was the right thing to say. Then, "No," she says. "I expect you don't." She returns to her book. After a moment she says, "You may go." You go, down the back stairs, 14 steps, left, past the pastry kitchen, past the candle store, back toward the servants' hall. Joan is waiting at the bottom. She's seen you come down. "Lady Margaret rang?" she asks. "The fire needed attending." Joan looks at you, the expression that's not quite warmth. "She rang the bell before in the afternoons," Joan says quietly. "When Agnes was here." She stopped. You say nothing. "I think she prefers not to ring if there's someone already nearby," Joan says. And then more quietly, "She rang for you. This is something. You both know it's something." You go back to the kitchen. January comes. The cold in January is different from November, and December cold. November cold is new, bracing, the body still working against it. December cold is resigned, endured. January cold is a fact of the universe. Your body has stopped fighting it and started working within it, the way the house works within it, with extra wood, extra layers, the measured deployment of warmth against the waste of heat to the world outside. Your hands in January, they're not the same hand you arrived with. 3 months of ash and water and firewood and hay and cold iron and rough rope have done something to your hands that is permanent, or close to permanent. The skin on the finger pads is thick. The knuckle skin is cracked in 2 places, small dry fissures that are painful in cold water and inconvenient in all weather. The broken nail has grown back but differently, slightly crooked. Your palms have the firm, roughened quality of hands that have been working. You look at them sometimes in the morning, under the thin grey light of the window, and you think, "This is what I am now." Not sadly, just as information. Your mother has hands like this. Your aunt, Joan. Agnes, whose hands should by rights be soft given her position, but aren't, because even the senior personal maid in a household of this size does not escape the wearing work entirely. The women in this household have working hands. Even Lady Margaret, ill and attended and resting, has hands that show 35 years of managing a household. Thinner than yours, less roughened, but with the joints slightly enlarged at the knuckle, the tendon visible when she writes. Bodies keep the account of what they've done. They write the record in skin and muscle, and the specific curvature of a spine accustomed to a particular set of loads. You're 3 months into being written in. By spring you'll look like someone who lives here. February is when Lady Margaret gets worse. It happens over a week. Gradually at first, slower in the morning, more coughing, the fire needing to be higher and higher, the physician coming Tuesday and then Thursday and then Tuesday again, then faster. A Wednesday morning when you come in with the water and the fire and she doesn't get up from bed, just looks at you from the pillow with the expression of someone conserving everything. Agnes barely leaves the room. The household tightens. Sir William comes from London and stays. Father Edmund's visits to the chapel, usually solitary and scheduled, become irregular, the door standing slightly open in the afternoons. You do your work, the fire, the water, the ash, every morning the house of office, and every morning the bowl. Agnes now sometimes too occupied with Lady Margaret's care to carry it herself, passing it to you in the corridor with the brevity of someone working through a list that has too many items. You carry it down, you empty it, rinse it, stand in the kitchen garden. The garden in February is bare and cold. The beds are frozen hard, the surface of the earth crystalline in the mornings, no sign yet of anything returning. The blackbird is still there, or still a blackbird, in the corner under the wall, picking at something in the frozen leaf mulch with a patience that suggests it has found that patience is what the frozen months require. You think about the bowl in your hands. You think, everything passes through here. Everything that Lady Margaret eats, everything she's given to help her, everything that's gone into her body in the maintenance of it against the thing that's working against it. It all eventually arrives here, in this bowl on this trip, at this drain. This is not morbid. This is just the shape of the work, the shape of what you've taken on. You wonder if she'll get better. You don't ask anyone, because asking isn't available to you as an option in any form that would get a real answer, and also because you suspect that the answer is not yet known, that the physicians don't know, that Joan doesn't know, that Sir William doesn't know. The bowl is rinsed, the drain is covered, you go back inside. In the second week of February, on a cold, clear morning that has the quality of winter deciding to be winter with total commitment, Lady Margaret asks Agnes for the priest. Father Edmund comes, the door closes. The household is very still. An hour later the door opens. Father Edmund comes out. His face gives nothing away, and everything away simultaneously. The particular face of a man who has been performing a specific function, and who knows that everyone looking at him knows what the function was. Agnes stays in the room. The rest of the household, those who are present, those who understand what this moment is, continues. You carry a log up the back stairs, set it in the fireplace as quietly as you have ever moved. The fire is built up, good and steady. You don't look at the bed. You don't look at Agnes, who is sitting by the window with her hands in her lap. Lady Margaret's voice from the bed. Alice. You look at her. She's thinner than she was in November. The illness has made its progress visible, but her face, in the fire's light, has the quality of something that has made its decisions and is not presently fighting anything. The observer's expression but calmer. You've been steady, she says. Thank you, my lady. A pause. Your family's in Suffolk. My mother is, my lady. Good. A breath. That's good. That's all. Her eyes close. You leave. In the corridor you stand still for a moment. This is what you have. A few words in a cold room in February. A lady in a chair who noticed that you were steady and said so. A bowl carried down 14 stairs every morning for 3 months. The smell of the drain in the kitchen garden. The frost on the garden beds. This is what service is at the ground level, not the grand story of proximity to power, not the gossip about the court and the king's council, not the tapestries and the beeswax candles and the velvet close-stool cover, not the silver ewer. This specific, this daily, this invisible, and yet the house is working, the fires are burning, the water is carried, the floor is clean. Lady Margaret is attended in her illness by people who do their jobs with competence and discretion and steadiness, and she knows this and she said so, and in the economy of words available in this house, that is not nothing. It is in fact something. Lady Margaret dies in the last week of February. She dies early in the morning before the household is properly up. Agnes is there. Father Edmund is there. Sir William was sent for in the night and arrived just before dawn, in time to be present. You know because Joan comes to your room in the half-dark 2 hours earlier than usual, and stands in the doorway and says, "Lady Margaret is gone." There's a pause that contains everything that isn't being said, and doesn't need to be said. "Will be needed," Joan says. You get up. The work after a death in a great household is specific and immediate, not time for grief, or rather, grief runs parallel to the work, in whatever part of you isn't occupied with the tasks at hand, the tasks that have to happen, because a household is a living system that continues regardless of what happens to any individual in it. The upper rooms need to be arranged, the household needs to be formally notified, messages need to be sent to Sir William's family, to Lady Margaret's family, to those in London who need to know. The funeral arrangements are the steward's business and Sir William's, but the physical preparation of the rooms is part of what the women of the household do, Agnes and Joan, and the senior tiring women. And you carry, you clean, you set fires, you carry water. The bowl makes its last trip. Agnes carries it this morning herself, which you understand is a matter of completion rather than practicality. You do the house of office, the ash, the firewood, the water. The house works. It always works. This is its nature. This is why the system exists. So that the work continues when the people change. Lady Margaret is gone, and the fires still need fuel, and the ash still needs clearing, and the floor still needs rushes, and the household still needs feeding. You've been here 4 months. You know how to do this. In the weeks after Lady Margaret's death, the household changes. Sir William is in London more, then back, then gone again for a longer stretch, while the legal and property arrangements of a death of this kind are attended to. Agnes stays, managing the household in Lady Margaret's absence, occupying a slightly elevated but structurally undefined position. Joan stays. The house takes on the particular quality of a house in transition, not empty, not diminished, but differently organised. The centre of gravity shifted. Lady Margaret's room is sealed off for a time. The still room remains Agnes's domain. You continue. The house of office every morning, the ash, the fire, the water. In March, the first thing comes back in the kitchen garden. A single clump of snowdrops, white and small and absolutely certain of themselves, pushing up between the frozen clods near the south wall. You see them on your morning trip to the drain. Stop for a moment, look at them, then go back inside. In April, Joan comes to you with something. She's been talking to Agnes. Agnes has been talking apparently to someone in the upper household, and there's a position, not a dramatic elevation, nothing that would be described as a promotion, just a reshuffling of tasks. One of the tiring women who worked with Lady Margaret, a woman named Juliet who has been here 15 years, is leaving, going to her sister's household in Devon, a family decision, not discontentment. Her position needs filling. Not fully. Juliet had experience and connections that take years to develop, but in part. Joan offers you the position. More precisely, Joan says that if you want it, you can have the duties assigned to Juliet's more junior role. It means leaving the ash and the house of office. It means a slightly higher station in the household hierarchy. It means, eventually, the possibility of being considered for a personal attendant role if and when Sir William remarries. It means doing work that is more visible, that carries more status, that involves more direct contact with the upper household. It also means, and Joan says this directly because Joan does not soft-pedal practical information, being trusted with more intimate duties. Not the same as the close-stool bowl exactly, but in the same category. The care of a personal wardrobe, the assistance with dress and undress, the things that, as Joan put it the first morning 3 months ago, belong to the invisible work of the house. You say yes. Joan nods as if she expected this. Monday, she says. You have Saturday and Sunday then. Saturday morning. You do the house of the office for the last time. It's April now and warmer, the cold finally relenting, the air carrying the distant suggestion of something green. The channel is less frozen. The smell is different in spring, more active, which is worse in one way and in another way simply the smell of things resuming. You rake the channel, replace the hay, carry the bucket. Then you stand in the courtyard for a moment. The cobbles are damp with dew but not frosty. The crow is somewhere above making its crow sounds. The kitchen is already going. You've been doing this for 5 months. This specific thing, this trip, this bucket, these cobbles, and now you won't do it again, or at least not as your task. You'll do other things, things that are closer to the centre of the house, closer to the people rather than to the drains and the channels. You think, this house works because someone does this every morning, and tomorrow that someone will be someone else. You carry the bucket to the drain, rinse it, set it where it lives against the wall of the house of office, go inside. In the late afternoon, you find Beth in the garden. She's at her chalk letters on the wall. She's past the alphabet now. She's working on words, short ones, practice words, copied from the almanac that she's borrowed from the servants' hall. You sit on the low wall beside her and watch her write. She's got cat and bed and fire and hand, each letter careful and separate, each word slightly more confident than the one before. I'm moving upstairs Monday, you tell her. She looks up, processes this. To the upper rooms, Juliet's position, part of it. She's quiet for a moment, tracing the A of hand. Then, Joan thinks you're good. She told you that. She didn't have to. Beth looks at you. She has, in 5 months, lost the slightly glazed look she arrived with. She knows the house now. She carries things efficiently and moves through the corridors with the confidence of someone who has stopped being afraid of the space. You've been doing Lady Margaret's room since October. Everyone knows. You say nothing. Was it? Beth starts, then stops. Was it what? Hard. She says it quietly. The bowl. You think about this. No, you say. Beth looks at you. I mean, you try to find the words. The first time it was strange, but strange isn't the same as hard. The house of offices, you gesture. That's harder, in terms of, you pause, in terms of what you have to not mind. Beth nods slowly. She's thinking about this in the way Beth thinks about things, quietly, from multiple angles, arriving at something. It's the same thing, though, she says. Isn't it? Just... She looks for words. Just different ends of it. You think about that. Yes, you say. Different ends of the same thing. She finishes hand and then writes Alice carefully, each letter separated by a tiny gap. Looks at it, looks at you. There, she says. The evening is warm for April. The light lasts longer now. Above the garden wall, the sky is the deep pale blue of early spring evening. The colour that means winter is really over. The kind of blue that you can see and feel simultaneously. The snowdrops are gone. In their place, in the bed along the south wall. Something green pushing up. What it will be isn't clear yet. It's just green, just beginning, just committed to the general direction of up. Tomorrow, Joan will give you your new list, but that's tomorrow. Right now you're sitting on the garden wall with Beth, who is writing your name on the cold stone in chalk, and the air smells of mud and green things and the distant suggestion of the kitchen fire, and somewhere in the corner the grey cat is asleep on top of the wall in the evening sun, one paw hanging over the edge, entirely indifferent to anything. The house makes its house sounds. The day winds down. You've been here 5 months. You know where everything goes. This is a Tudor household in the year 1547. The same year Henry VIII died and his son inherited an England that was trying to decide what it was becoming. The same year the court was full of men arranging and rearranging themselves around a 9-year-old king, while outside the court, in houses like this one, the work continued. The ash was carried, the fires were kept, the floors were strewn with fresh rushes and dried lavender. The bowl was taken down 14 steps to the kitchen garden drain. 500 years from now, none of the names will survive except the famous ones. The Henry, the Edward, the men whose portraits hang in museums and whose decisions are in the history books. But the house worked because someone carried the bucket. The house worked because someone laid the fire before dawn in the cold. The house worked because someone navigated 14 steps in the dark, both hands on the bowl, cover on, quiet. The house worked because someone showed up every morning and did the thing that needed doing without requiring the thing to be acknowledged as having been done. You did that. You're doing it still. Somewhere, tonight, the church bell is ringing. Not close. The church on the property is small, its bell thin and light. But there's a larger church a mile away whose bell carries on still evenings. It's ringing now. You don't count the strokes. You're too tired to count. The fire in your room is low. You'll let it go tonight. It's warm enough now. The April warmth holding through the night. The first real warmth since October. The blanket is enough. Your hands on the blanket, pulling it up. Working hands. Real hands. The hands of someone who has been here long enough to have hands like this. Outside, the spring night continues. Somewhere in the kitchen, the banked fire breathes. The rushes in the hall settle. The cat is on its wall. The snowdrops are gone and the green things are coming, and the drain in the kitchen garden is covered, and the house of office stands in the courtyard ready for morning. The wheel turns. It's always turning. This is what you've learned. The wheel turns, and someone has to be there at each point on it, steady, doing the work. The ash point and the water point and the fire point and the drain point. Someone for each one. You're the someone. You've always been the someone. The work is not glamorous. The work will not be written down. No portrait of Alice Marsh of Beccles, housemaid, age 14, will hang on any wall. No book will record what she carried or where she carried it, or how many stairs she descended with what in her hands. But she carried it. But she was here. But she was steady. And that, in the grand, invisible machinery of a life in service in Tudor England, is everything. You're warm enough, fed enough, Known enough, that's enough. The sounds of the house grow smaller as sleep finds you. The distant bell, the fire's last breath, the spring dark outside the tiny window, the air coming in carrying something that might be blossom, might be mud, might be the garden waking up. Let it come. Let the day go. Let the wheel keep turning without you. Just for a few hours, just until dawn. You've earned this. Take it. Good night.